Survival rifle. What does that even mean? That's what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, use of force, the right way, with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am going to put in the bio because I think you should care about who's giving you the opinions and thoughts that they have. Does it come from real-world first-hand experience? That's something you should ask, I think, anytime you listen to somebody. Why is what they say valid? For that reason, I'm going to put in the bio, then we'll get into survival rifle. Survival rifle. Bush plane goes down in the Alaska wilderness. One man versus nature to survive in the rugged wilds of Alaska. Is that a survival rifle? Some people would say, no, I don't live in Alaska. I don't fly bush planes in Alaska. A survival rifle is hardcore combat rifle that I need to fight my way out of the urban jungle and make it out of Atlanta or Los Angeles or hopefully not New York City. And another guy's going to say, that's not a survival rifle. Who would even go to Atlanta? A survival rifle is Grandpa's old single-shot 22 that he used to feed himself in the Depression. And if it's good enough in 1934, well, by golly, it's good enough in 2024. That's a survival rifle. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. What does it even mean? Does it even really have a meaning, or is it just a term we throw around like tactical? Like, what does tactical mean? Come on. It just sounds cool. Spring some tactical on it, man. Marketing. Is it just a marketing thing, or does it actually mean something? Does survival rifle actually mean something? If so, what? And should we even use the term? Anyway, that's what we're going to talk about, dive into today. Survival rifles. What does it mean? What are we talking about? So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, L.A.P.D. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast regional rifle champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Melito. Welcome to the podcast. All right, and this may be harder than I thought it would be, but let's try and define, or let me try and define what I'm talking about when I say survival as it pertains to survival rifle. Staying alive. Now, obviously, a home invader, if you use that rifle to protect your family, that is a survival rifle in the pure sense of the word, but I don't think that's what we mean when we talk about the term survival rifle, right? We probably more accurately would say that's a home defense weapon. For survival in the context that if I say survival rifle, I think what most people conjure up in their mind is long-term or semi-long-term breakdown, collapse scenario. Peanut butter and chocolate hitting the fan. A paradigm shift. A collapse in infrastructure, society, culture, empire. Empires rise and fall like the tides in the ocean. Something that fundamentally shifts the way that we live today. In that kind of scenario, and there's a ton of those, but I think in any of those, you would picture a survival rifle. So, not that a gun that you use for home defense can't be that also, but guns that would be useful in that kind of scenario. And I'm not even saying a rifle is your best choice. You've probably heard me say many times, if I'm picking one long gun for the end of the world, no caveats, no this is your scenario, then I'll tailor-make it to that scenario, obviously, right? That's why guns are like tools. They're purpose-built for specific purposes. But if you say no other caveats, you can only have one long gun and one handgun, I'm taking the shotgun. It's the most versatile. But let's talk about survival rifles today. I think for the long-term survival scenario, for most people, you should look at, not that you have to, you should look at the duality of function of a rifle. A rifle can be used for many things. You can use it for target shooting, you can use it for just having fun, you can use it for teaching discipline to young children, not by hurting them with it, I mean by teaching them to respect and use a weapon properly. You can use a rifle for many things, but in this context, in this vernacular, in this episode, the two primary functions, I think, of a survival rifle are defense and putting food on the table. And you might vacillate as to which one of those is more important, and that's going to depend on you. Here's the thing. You heard a little bit of my bio. That's certainly not all of my bio. You might imagine I've been in some pretty hairy situations, by the grace of God, not because I'm any better. And people have asked, why don't you talk about your personal, when I was in Nam and there were Charlies in the trees. And obviously wasn't in Nam, right? I was in Iraq. I fought in the War on Terror, did a couple of combat tours there, but I don't like doing that. I don't like telling war stories. I don't like telling stories of my police work because, one, I don't want to make it like I'm bragging, because I don't think I made it through that because I was better than any of the men that died in those desert sands or on the nasty, filthy streets of this country. But because God saved me and He had a purpose for me. So I don't want to brag. And I also don't want to complain about how horrible things were. And I don't know how to do it without doing either one of those. But as you might imagine, I've been in some pretty hairy situations. By the grace of God, He kept me breathing through that. That said, the number of violent armed encounters I've been in pales in comparison to the number of times that I've had to eat. Period. Unless I'm fasting, I generally eat several times a day, depending on what I'm doing that day or whatever, but probably eating several times a day. You're probably eating several times a day. I don't care the biggest, baddest Navy SEAL or French Foreign Legion commando with all the scars and tattoos. That guy has eaten more in his life than he's been in violent armed encounters. Just period. By a long shot. Don't care who it is. Don't care if it's Chuck Norris or a nursing infant. They've all eaten more than they've been in violent armed encounters. So you might think, well, obviously the putting food on the table is the number one criteria. Well, here's the thing. I can get food in many different ways. So I understand that. And today, I love hunting to put food on the table. I really thought about going hunting today. I love putting meat on the table by hunting. It's something I really love and enjoy doing. But I'll concede there are many other ways to put food on the table. Even in a grid down peanut butter and chocolate hit the fan scenario, there'll be many ways. Also, here's another thing to consider is that if I need food, I can go a while without food and not die. If I need defense, the other part of this equation, to protect oneself, if I need that, I probably need it right now. Right? Even during war, generally there's a lot of, you might think of it as all action, 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 but it's often months of boredom with instance of intense testosterone and adrenaline dumps. And then weeks, months of boredom, even in combat tours. But in those situations, if you need that rifle, you need it right now. And so you might think defense is the more important of the two. I'm not here to really argue which one, because it depends on the situation that you're in. But I would say both are important. And I would say both require skill. I would say in both of these scenarios, the rifle is a tool, like any other tool, like a hatchet or a wire snare or a punji pit. Right? All those are tools that could both help in both these scenarios. The rifle is a tool like that. The rifle is a tool to put food on the table and defend one's or one's neighbor's life as oneself. Either put food on the table or protect life, to preserve life. And both those, actually, I guess, however you're doing it, to feed oneself or to protect oneself, preserving life. And the rifle is a tool that can help make that easier, make that possible in situations where otherwise may not be possible. Being able to eat where without a rifle you may not be able to eat. Or being able to defend oneself where without a rifle one might turn up dead because one could not protect oneself. So which one of those you think is more important will obviously have a giant impact on what you choose as a survival rifle. And I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong. I'm not so vain as to say that your survival rifle has to be the same one that I pick. It may not. We may not live in the same geographical location, and as far as numbers go, many of you probably don't live in the vast wilderness of the northern Idaho panhandle on the Canadian border. Population density here is low, and the elk and moose and deer and pheasant and salmon and trout, and turkey and geese and ducks and quail and dove and who knows how many other delicious little sources of protein and giant sources of protein are around me. It's no coincidence that I lived here. I've traveled all around the country. Spent, if you don't know, live as a neo-nomad. Didn't put that in the bio, but spent years traveling around the U.S. with and without, before I met my wife and after I met my wife, traveling to find out a good place to live as far as survivability goes. It's no coincidence that we're here. But you may not live in that same environment, right? If you live east of the Mississippi, deer hunting's probably not real viable. Look at what happened, going back to the Great Depression we alluded to in the bio. Look at what happened to the deer population during the Great Depression. And look at how many people live east of the Mississippi now versus the Great Depression. So you might decide rightfully that, taking deer, although it may happen in the beginning, probably isn't a very sustainable thing for you. Or anything else for that matter other than very, very small game. And if you only, let's say you're a pacifist, and you're probably not a pacifist if you listen to this show, but maybe you are, and I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong. That story of the man, Hacksaw Ridge, guy was a pacifist. He's a brave man. I'm not going to fault him. I am not a pacifist. That is not my theology. I'm not saying that I'm certainly not saying that you can't be a Christian and a pacifist. I'm saying that I am a Christian and I am not a pacifist. If that person is never going to be willing to take another human life, then it's a moot point for defense for him, right? That plays no part in his equation for a survival rifle. In which case, if he lives east of the Mississippi, and deer are probably going to be all but extinct pretty quick, unless you're in like the very north part of Maine, then that guy talking about that 22, for him that might be a great pick. For him, a single shot 22 might be a great pick. Very few moving parts. It's going to help him conserve ammo. I'm not saying that would be my pick. But since we got there randomly through thought, let's continue on in this thought experiment. The 22 as a survival rifle. In fact, many of the U.S. Air Force, and I should do a whole episode on military survival rifles, but many of the survival rifles from days of yore were 22s. The 22 has a lot of attributes that lend itself well to a survival rifle. There are many, the big one being you can carry a lot of ammo. You can also store a lot of ammo if you are on a budget, right? The average person, let's say you make the average annual income, which I think is like $50-some thousand a year now. Okay, let's say you have budgeted $50 a month for ammo. You can store up a lot more ammo for $50 a month in 2 years than you can 308, for instance. So it's got that going for it. It's very affordable. You can stockpile a lot of it, whether you're talking about space or weight. And weight is the big one. I've said this before as an example, and this is not my plan for the apocalypse, nor should it be yours. You could run out shirtless, wearing Crocs and a pair of BDU pants, and put 1,000 rounds of 22 long rifle in your cargo pockets. No pack, no nothing. And run out ready for the apocalypse. And that's probably, if you're judicious, especially with a single shot 22, might be all the ammo that you ever need for your entire life. Really hard to do that with many other options. So that's one big benefit of the 22, the ability to carry a lot of ammo. You can take deer with a 22. It's not great for it. I would not advise it anytime unless it was an actual survival scenario to put food on the table. Or perhaps if you were out doing something else and you saw a really injured deer that you could walk up to and you were going to put it out of its misery. Like, I've been a professional trapper. You accidentally get a deer caught in a snare and you try and set it free, but instead of it getting free, it freaks out and gets so injured that there's no way it's going to survive. In which case, a 22 is what you have because you were planning on trapping fox, and you put one where the base of the skull meets the spine. End of deer. Okay. Like for that, but I would never advise you going out hunting deer with a 22 in normal times. That said, plenty of deer have been killed with a 22 because it's what one had. It's not great for it, and you're really limiting your shots. And don't forget, the point of hunting deer is not to shoot a deer. After you shoot the deer, you still have to recover the deer. One, it's just being a bad steward of God's creation if you shoot a deer and it gets away and you don't recover it and it rots. Also, from a practical survival standpoint, you wasted that time and calories looking for that deer, and you waste the ammo. So it's not great for that. It can be done. Another benefit to the 22, even without a suppressor, if you're comparing it to many other rounds, most other rounds, it's going to be quieter. So if you're out in the middle of nowhere in the country, that might not make any difference. But if you're in a suburban environment, a people hive, it may make a big difference if you're trying to be more clandestine, trying to move through an area or not give away your position. They're not quiet, but they're a lot quieter than a centerfire rifle, full-powered rifle round. And I think that was also a big reason why many of the, going back to the military survival rifles, were in 22. If you're talking about a downed pilot, he doesn't want to get discovered. If he shoots let's say he shoots a grouse, and then the Viet Cong come down on him like a hammer, that's not a good situation. He might have gotten a grouse, but that's bad. So being quieter can be a good thing. So those are all attributes of the 22. The 22 can be used for defense. It's not great for it. Again, if it's a survival situation, somebody's coming at you with a machete or a tomahawk or even another firearm, and that's what you have, then obviously if that's the tool that you have, that's a tool that you're going to have to use. But it's not great, right? Nobody is the Russians and the Chinese and us. We're not looking at throwing out our 223s and our 308s and adopting 1022s to run into battle with. We're not. It's not a great defensive choice. It's a specialty tool, like the Israeli IDF will use a Ruger 1022 for specialty things. But as far as defense, let's just say it can be used. It's not great for it. If your main thing is defense, so let's go to the other side of the spectrum here. Let's say your main thing is defense. You probably want something quite a bit more powerful than a 22. Because even if you shoot, if that guy's trying to kill you, which is, like, why are you shooting this dude? Probably because he's trying to kill you or somebody else. Dude's trying to kill you, and you shoot him 3 times with a 22, and he dies 2 weeks later of an infection, but he still killed you, right? That's a loss. It's kind of like the deer that you shot that you didn't recover. But this time it's even worse because it's game over. As far as your survival scenario, right? Because if you shot the dude 3 or 4 times, but he still was able to get to you and kill you or return fire before he died, then that 22 failed to do its thing, which is defend you. So you might want something a little bit more powerful in that scenario. And the 2 big ones that come to mind, the ones that dominate today, because they dominate the battlefield today, and that is the 223/556. I'm putting those in the same ballpark. I'm not going to get into the minor details differences between the two. And the 308 or 7.62x51 NATO. Again, I'm not going to get into the minutia between the exact differences. But the 223 and the 308, or the 5.56 versus 7.62x51, depending on whether you like standard or metric. And there are arguably many cartridges that do a better job ballistically. Like, you might make a very easy case that the 7mm 08 is better in almost every way ballistically than the 308. But you're probably not choosing the 7mm 08 for a survival rifle because it's nowhere near as common, and you have to be able to get ammo. And it's just not available in the amount and the variety of weapons that one might like that the 308 is, right? So there's more than just a ballistics capability, and because of that, the 2 standards, and they're outliers. And I should say this is in the U.S. The 2 main ones here are 5.56 and 308. You may have made the case even 5-10 years ago that the 7.62x39, but I think that is the rifle version of the 40 caliber Smith & Wesson. I think it's past its heyday. You can get ammo now cheaper in 5.56 than you can 7.62x39. The AK round, unless you already have it and or stockpiling it, I think it makes less sense than either of those 2 options. But AK is a fine option. An AK-47 is many people's go-to apocalypse gun. I will point out, be cautious, because not everything that looks like an AK and smells like an AK is an AK. Unless you have an actual registered machine gun, bring-back AK-47, what you have is not an AK-47, and they are built to varying degrees of quality and put together with varying degrees of quality. Don't think because it looks like an AK, it's dependable like an AK. There are some that are. You got an Arsenal AK, good to go. You got a Galil, good to go. But many of them, and many of the cheap ones, are not dependable like an actual AK. Now that I've angered probably 75% of the AK listeners, the AK is a fine choice if that's what you're thinking. But I will point out that you can get that AK pattern in both 308 and or 5.56, and I don't think there's anything heretical about that. Now the AK is like the dominant battlefield weapon of our time, and I said in the U.S., many places like Canada, think because of their import laws, they can still get AK rounds 7.62x39 quite a bit cheaper. So for them, it might be a different thing. They have their own issues with not being able to get a lot of modern semi-auto rifles. But anyway, it's going to depend on you. So I'm speaking mostly to the American audience in 2024. If you already have, dozens of spam cans of 7.62x39 stockpile because you got it when it was cheap, then hats off to you. But again, I think the 2 dominant ones for us today in 2024 in America are 5.56 or 308. And both are good for different things. I own both. I would choose either one of those depending on the scenario, if there are caveats. If I had to pick a survival rifle right now where I am, if peanut butter and chocolate hit the fan, whatever that looks like, where I'm at now, I would pick 308 for sure. It's an easy winner. If I was east of the Mississippi, where the vast majority of the population lives, my first inclination would be to get out get west of not just the Mississippi but the Missouri. And if I'm going long distances on foot with super high population density, I'm probably going to choose 223 in that scenario. So that both of them are valid things. And there are other things you may want to consider. Right? You may want to be able, in fact, I think you should be, skill is going to play a lot more, despite what you think you can't solve every problem, American, with the click of a button on Amazon. The fact that you have a really cool optic on your gun makes no difference if it's not zeroed. The fact that you have a really cool, perhaps the king of the modern AKs, a Galil, let's say, and whatever caliber you want, doesn't make any difference if you can't run that thing. If you fumble on your reload and drop the magazine because you haven't practiced your AK reloads because they're a pain in the butt. Right? So there are many reasons why you might choose a manually operated gun. A big one being that you can have it and practice with it where you are right now. Those laws may not matter. There may not be any malum prohibitum when peanut butter and chocolate hits the fan, but there is now. And I'd rather you have a manual transmission gun that you can run well and practice with now than some other gun that you have no experience with and don't know how to use. This ain't Hollywood, right? You don't just pick up whatever gun it is and you're just awesome with it. So there are many reasons. That's just one big one I can think of. Well, you may choose, let's say, a bolt action. If you live in a very infringy state, a draconian type state, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, California, and I know you can in some places get kind of abominations of ARs that have been modified or whatever, but you get what I'm saying. There are many other caveats that may apply to your specific situation. One big one, what about finish? What if you live in a maritime environment? Stainless steel is probably a big deal for you. Chrome line bores, chrome line barrels, probably a big deal for you. Somebody that lives in the Sonoran Desert, southern Arizona, they probably don't care. Because that gun will probably outlast them and not rust, because that environment is very different than the barrier islands and swamps of the southeast United States from whence I came. And that, I guess that's my big problem with the term survival rifle. Is that surviving what, right? I don't have TV, and I would encourage you not to have TV either, but that's on you. Before I got rid of TV, when I had TV, there was a show called Doomsday Preppers. That predates me getting rid of TV. And one thing I remember on there, they would always have the person, they'd be like, I'm getting ready for X, whatever X is. I'm getting ready for peak oil in 2025. Actually, they probably would have said, I'm getting ready for peak oil in 2012, because it was probably before that, right? But I don't see the future. I'm not a false prophet. There are pretty stiff penalties in the Bible for false prophets. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we're going to go through a partial collapse, a full collapse. I don't know if there's going to be stricter laws or no laws. I don't know what the situation is going to be like. I can look at history and see some commonalities when things go bad: famine, pestilence, inflation, disease, and try and wrap that into what I'm getting ready for. But I don't know the future. I don't see the future, and you don't either. So that's the big problem with the survival rifle. What are you trying to survive, right? It's vastly different for me here in the northern Idaho Canadian border wilderness than, let's say, somebody just over the border in Canada. Because there's a lot of guns here that I can have that they can't have. They can't even have a handgun. I know we're talking about survival rifles, but if I'm heading out, I'm going to have a long gun and a handgun, God willing, where they can't have the handgun. That may completely change their equation. Even though geographically and as far as the biome goes, the flora and the fauna, very similar. They may be only a few miles away, but they can't have the things that I can have here. And they probably can't stockpile them. They're probably not having a SCAR 17 and a SIG 226. Right? That's not on the table for them. So that's a big issue with the term survival rifle. I don't know, and you don't know. And I don't know your situation. Unless you're a patron, I probably don't know you very well. I feel like I spend more time with the patrons, especially the insider group in our chat, than I spend with my own family. So I think I know some of them pretty well in their situations, and I can often give them some pretty good advice. But survival rifle, for what? For when? For where? Like, I've got one guy that's a patron that lives on, I think it's a U.S. protectorate out in the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere in the Caribbean. His survival solution is going to be far different than the dude that lives just north of Atlanta. That's going to be far different than the couple of Canadians that I have in the insider chat. These are just a few of the like-minded individuals that are part of Patreon and part of the insider chat. Right? Do I think that I have a one rifle solution for all of them? No. So, again, I think that's the problem with the term survival rifle. Survival is such a broad topic. So, instead of you trying to figure out what the best survival rifle is, or what the next hot topic is in survival rifles, or what somebody else says is best, what do you think is going to happen? And you don't see the future either, but your parameters might be a lot different than mine, right? What are your legalities? What can you afford? What is the population density where you live? What is the flora and fauna in which you live? Are you willing to take a human life? Don't just do the bravado thing and be like, yeah, they did a study, I forget when, in the military, and a big chunk of men in the military and the infantry aren't willing to take a human life when it comes down to it. So be honest with yourself. If you're not, you're better off with a rifle that doesn't deal with that. That'd be better for putting meat on the table if you're not willing to take a human life. I'm not putting that down. I'm just saying that's a reality, and you should be, don't front for me. Be real with yourself. What are you willing to do and not willing to do? Heck, you might be totally willing to take a human life, but you might be a vegan. I mean, if you're listening to this, I doubt it, but hey, you could be a vegan, you could be a vegetarian. I don't know if you're going to stay a vegetarian if you're starving to death, but hey, maybe you have that conviction. I'm not here to put that down. That, again, that might greatly sway your situation, and I'm going to the dramatic to prove a point. If I did an episode and said, this is the best survival rifle ever, it would be a completely ludicrous statement. One, we don't know the future. We don't know the scenario. I don't know you. I don't know where you live. I don't know your parameters. All you can do is watch and be ready and consider the parameters in your area. Do these kind of thought experiments for you. It doesn't matter if an Alaskan bush pilot has a takedown 45-70 for grizzly bear defense if he goes down in the coastal Alaska Aleutian Island chain. Because unless that's you might not live within 2,000 miles of a brown bear. So because that's a great survival rifle for him doesn't make it a great survival rifle for you. I may be mispronouncing, but the Finnish sniper Simo Haya, he may have taken on a ton of Russians with a Mosin Nagant. That doesn't mean a Mosin Nagant is a good choice for you for a survival defensive rifle. One, that was what he had. And he was really, really good at fieldcraft. And he was a good hunter. And he turned that on people when it came to defend his homeland. That doesn't mean a Mosin Nagant is a great survival rifle choice for you. Unless it is. So what are you watching and getting ready for? What are your likely scenarios? What's your geography? What's your population density equation? Is it just you? Are you married? Are you married with kids? Are you married with kids and elderly? That you're the head of that household? Do you already live on a farm or a homestead? Like, all these things are factors that you should consider for you. So that's my main issue with the term survival rifle. It's way too broad a category, so narrow it down for you. Pour all those criteria through your funnel, filter them through your filters, and see what comes out the bottom. What are some good choices for you for a survival rifle? Anyway, with that, I'll start wrapping up this episode. If you thought this content was worth anything, if you want to contribute because you want to support the podcast, that's the main reason. I take no sponsors on this show. I'm not going to talk bad about... Anyway, I am not some gun entertainer that's getting paid by some gun company to say, you got to buy this next space age bullpup rifle. It's going to save you in the apocalypse, man. That's not what you get here. I don't take sponsors. I've turned down sponsors. You shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes and twists the words of the righteous. It's hard for me to even find channels that I'll watch, because most of them, it seems like I'm just trying to be sold to. I'm just trying to be pushed a product. I'm doing a very poor job here, to be honest, of making money, because I'm giving you the content for free, hoping that you'll pay it back and say, you know what, I thought this was worth something. You're not trying to sell me some space age bullpup rifle and telling me that's what I need for the apocalypse. You're telling me to think for myself, be a critical thinker, and here are some things to consider, and I value that content and much of the other stuff that you do. I want to help you out. That's what I'm hoping you'll do. If you're that kind of man, hopefully you'll step up and become a patron. And you get something out of it. There's a lot of Patreon-only content. Been putting a lot of Patreon-only episodes that you're just never going to get here as the general audience. So if you want that content, I talk about stuff on there that I'm not going to talk about on here. So if you want that content, again, I mostly want you to become a patron because you honestly think you got something out of this and you think it's worth supporting. But you also get some insider-only content. So it's not just give me money for the sake of giving me money. You also get something out of it too. So consider becoming a patron. With that, the tactical tip of the day. This plays in nicely with today's episode. Whatever kind of rifle you get, 22, center fire, 308. A lot of modern guns have polymer stocks. A lot of those polymer stocks are hollow. A lot of those polymer stocks are hollow and are only covered with a butt pad that is usually, in my experience, either a flathead or a Phillips head screwdriver, which you could just have one of those as part of your kit for your multi-tool, and you can put extra supplies inside the stock. If we're talking survival rifles, right? You might want at least 1 or 2 rounds of ammunition in there just in case. You might want a bore snake in there to clean out the rifle just in case you drop it in the mud. You might want some pre-oiled patches in a Ziploc bag in there, because you might want to go a little bit deeper. You might want to put a fairly lightweight razor blade or 2 back there in case you lose your knife and you actually got some game and you need to field dress it. You might want to put a little button compass back there. You get the idea. Whatever the space allows. And you can usually put something back there that's lightweight to stop it from rattling around. Again, most modern polymer stocks are hollow. You can also go one step further if you don't care as much about aesthetics. Limb Saver makes some really good recoil absorbing pads. And even if you don't need one for the recoil absorption, they're usually some soft rubber that fits over the buttstock. We'll just take the original factory recoil butt pad off, put that one on there because it slips on. So you can literally just grab it and pull it off. So you can get your supplies much easier. So you want to keep a bottle of CLP back there. Or you want to keep a spare extractor back there. Whatever the case is, right? You get the idea. It's a storage container that's on the rifle. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that every one may receive the things done in his body according to that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. Whatever your survival rifle is, remember your survival morals. Morals are morals, and right and wrong is right and wrong. And I'm not talking about malum prohibitum. I'm not talking about bad because it's prohibited. I'm not talking about going 75 when the speed limit is 65. I'm talking about malum and say, evil by nature, the things that don't change, that God says this is wrong. You shall not murder. We talked about defense. There's a clear line in the Bible for what is murder and what is not murder, what is manslaughter, what is justifiable for defense. You're going to give an account to yourself. You might even be able to weasel your way out and lie your way out of something here on earth, a punishment. But even your thoughts and intents of the heart, God knows those. You don't escape Him. You can't escape Him. Whatever your survival rifle, right and wrong is right and wrong. So ponder that. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.